The next discussion will be surrounding best practices in the community development over 20 years. The moderator for that panel will be Miss Celia Dillon. And we have a few people presenting. We'll be hearing from Mr. Sweeney. No, I'm sorry, we did that earlier. Mr. Stephen Sinclair, Mrs. Dainty-Ann Barrett-Smith, and Mrs. Stacey-Anne Preston will be among the speakers, along with Mr. Gresford Bennett. So ladies and gentlemen, they're gathering themselves at this time. They'll be here momentarily. We invite you to the podium. All right, hold on, before I come up. No, everybody looking a little. Let's get up for a minute. We call it ethnic fatigue. It looks like it's setting in the room. And we have an entire afternoon to enjoy. So let's get up for a minute, ladies and gentlemen. Let's move from a horizontal to a vertical position. Allow some of the food to go down into our feet and to circulate throughout our bodies. Because all of the blood is going to one place right now, and the poor people who are coming to the podium might be challenged. All who knows, is which table over there, so? On this side, so no, stand up. I'd like us to stand and take a deep breath and exhale and do a little stretching. Anybody say hi to anybody new today? Have you met anyone that you did not know before? Make sure you meet up all the people at your table and do not only sit with people who you know. No, it's oh. So at this time, I want you to exchange names at your table. Okay? And laugh a little bit. And put your hands together for the team from JSIF who will be coming to do the next presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Stacy stole my line. I was going to use the ethnic fatigue to get everybody going, but I'm glad she did that for me. Today, the Jamaica Social Investment Fund is glad to be presenters at the symposium because joint action for total solution is something that we have done for the last 20 years. Our mandate for community development means that in order to get that benefit to the communities that we have to have joint action. We have to work with stakeholders. We have to work with ministries. And we just today will share with you some of our best practices over the 20 years. My name is Celia Dillon, your moderator for the section, and I'll be asking Mr. Omar Sweeney, our managing director, to come up now and give us a few words.
Thank you, Celia. I also share the same observation that we had still quite a full room, but I realized that there's different motivations. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our pleasure this afternoon to really participate and share our best practices with you at the session today. This morning, I was on a radio interview with Dr. Orville Taylor, most of us know, and he remarked that he was looking at some numbers from a study that showed that only 30% of persons in communities felt that they were engaged by all these social interventions that are happening. And there was another study that showed that 80% of the residents that were studied felt that government and other actors in community interventions should continue to lead a process of transformation of these communities. And so the divergence of those numbers brings us back to the reason why we have to ensure that community participate in the process, that communities are at the center of the process, and that communities really feel a sense of engagement long after these interventions have come and have gone. I mean, we know this because this is what really sustains engagements. This is what really enables us to move on to assist other communities. And so a lot of good practices has been shared since this morning. I think that one of the focuses of this symposium in only its second year is that we should at least align and agree upon a unity of purpose, considering that we all share and target the same set of stakeholders. And so I really feel strongly and passionate about the fact that we should drive to have these types of symposium almost to the scale of something that would have to be held at the Montego Bay or the Jamaica Conference Center. I mean, this should be really literally the hundreds and thousands of persons working in communities every single day. Finally, I will say to you that I was also asked on that same interview, what will be the plan coming out of this community? Is this just this symposium? Is this just yet another talk shop? I feel confident in responding in saying that these are the practitioners that are working in communities, and so the response can only be the effect that the communities see after we have these types of symposiums. So it is really my hope and trust that we will come away from here today, not only from this session in JSIF, but the overall symposium, really with re-energized vigor and purpose that will help us to really go out and continue to serve communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. So we're here to talk about best practices, but we know that the new tagline is next practices, right? We're going to have Mr. Stephan Sinclair, a project officer at the Jamaica Social Investment Fund with over 6 years experience in community development, and he's also an urban planner. Today he'll talk to us about, hiding in plain sight, the social in physical infrastructure.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so thanks for the introduction, Celia. So this afternoon we're going to be looking at hiding in plain sight social and physical infrastructure. The JSIF approach. Infrastructure development is a critical facet of addressing poverty and other development goals. Now, JSIF is key in trying to ensure that we address the development goals that are geared towards Vision 2030. In that, JSIF has been effectively assisting underserved communities for over the last 20 years to build their social network through the provision of various infrastructure solutions. JSIF's primary core deliverable is infrastructure that satisfies social need. What do we mean by this? Let's take a look at one of our projects. Here we're looking at Crystal City. Crystal City now is a community in the parish of St. Thomas in the community of Prospect, which has approximately 225 residents. 22 informal households were relocated and provided with housing. These structures, however, were built without sanitation facilities, which led to unhygienic practices and living conditions. This led the Benevolent Society of Prospect to apply to JSIF for a sanitary project. Existing condition to be addressed. Stakeholders often have to address issues with limited resources. Now, one of the primary things that JSIF does so well is how we align ourselves with all our stakeholders, the line ministries and the NGOs, all the necessary stakeholders that must come together to leverage support. Having been relocated through partnership with the NHT and the Food for the Poor, there was still a shortfall. Of course, we all know within our sector, based on our financial standings, that we don't have an unlimited amount of funds. This is why partnerships are so important. So in the picture on the right, you will see one of the whole Food for the Poor houses that was given. And due to the lack of sanitary convenience that was given, the picture at the bottom here shows, it gives a little detail of how they were practicing their sanitation. So given the need that the Providence Society had seen, and they had come to JSIF, this was our initial technical scope, right? To provide 22 bathroom facilities for 22 houses, which were looked at water closets, lavatory basins, shower, and outdoor tub which is supposed to help with food preparations. But we didn't just give any ordinary sanitation block. We ensured that the sanitation block came with a septic tank system. A system because we are ISO certified company and we are so big on the environment. We ensure that we gave a system that once the person uses the bathroom, it goes to a filtration system which uses a reed bed, chlorination chamber, septic tank. Here's a picture of one such. So to the right, you have the sanitation block, and here's one of the residents who is looking on what was provided: the septic tank, reed bed, and chlorination chamber. So when we went in the community to address the technical issue, which is the sanitation, JSIF could not help but realize the level of unemployment, illiteracy, poor sanitation, poor hygiene, blocked drains, absence of street lighting, and poor garbage disposal. So, our solution, our response, though the infrastructural needs were addressed, the overwhelming social need within the community required an initiative to ensure that the project was cohesive as possible. This includes social interventions such as facilitating the receipt of civil documents, improving education and qualification, facilitate increased access to employment and income generation. Let me stop right there. JSIF ensured that we did some amount of training and also helped persons to start their own small businesses, which would help to garner funds, one, because as we said earlier, we have a chlorination system which uses chlorine tablets. They will be able to earn funds to be able to purchase those tablets and also be able to pay a cesspool company to come in and draw those septic tanks when needed. So you can see how the cycle continues and how it sustains the project. And of course, improve sanitation practices. Social success story. To the extreme right, you can see where we have a social officer in the field who goes out to ensure that she learns the needs of the community, get the community comfortable enough so they can express to us what their true needs are. To the bottom right, you can see residents who benefited from our educational section, where they got bags and school supplies. At the top left here, you have the fisher folks from the community, who through our partnership with RADA, we were able to provide them with equipment. Here we look at the water for poultry. JSIF also through the partnership with RADA was also able to help them out with poetry, so we gave them funding to help start up the business and also the equipment to sustain the business. Traditional versus the integrated approach. The traditional approach to infrastructure is physical solution to visible need. But JSIF has sought to go with the integrated approach to addressing underlying issues with facilitate or give rise to physical problem, holistic development of community and individual poverty, provide access to services. This is key. If the community is able to access the basic services, then they are basically cut off for the rest of society. Inclusive development, recognizing the issues facing various vulnerable groups and cohorts and population. Empowerment of residents, to participate in the process and contribute to further development in their community. JSIF is big on capacity building. We seek to empower the community persons so that they can help themselves to solve issues. What have our lessons learned? Technical interventions must go beyond the provision of physical solution and extend to examine the underlying issues which facilitate or could exhibit the social economic realities of residents. And again, we look at empowerment of these residents. And JSIF is big on this. Development of assistance needed not only to address public poverty, but the need to also examine the dynamic private poverty. Interventions which are not holistic, of a holistic nature, will not be sustainable. And of course, partnership is critical, is a critical factor in facilitating project implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Stephan, for that presentation of how social infrastructure, the social in infrastructure sometimes seems to be hiding in plain sight. Because we have to remember that we need an integrated approach to access to services. And in terms of that integrated approach, we've been hearing this term lately, mainstreaming in gender and environment. Does anybody here know what that means? You've heard it before, but what does that really mean? We're going to have Barrett-Smith and Mrs. Stacey Preston make a presentation to us now about mainstreaming gender and environment. Dainty-Ann Barrett-Smith is a social development officer at the Jamaica Social Investment Fund. She's a trained social worker with a master's degree in development studies and is also a certified project management professional. Mrs. Preston is a graduate of the University of West Indies and holds a Master of Philosophy in Marine Science. She has over 15 years experience in the field of environmental management and currently works as the environmental officer at JSIF, where her role is managing JSIF's environmental aspects, which are vital to maintaining our ISO 14001 certification. We welcome the ladies to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. As our development efforts evolve, we have recognized the need for inclusion of cross-cutting issues in development planning and action. Two of these cross-cutting issues are gender and environment, and it is important that we integrate these into development planning and action so as to ensure that development is sustainable, but also that we do not have any negative unintended impacts or outcomes from these projects. What is mainstreaming really? Mainstreaming is a strategy. I'm so sorry. Right. Mainstreaming is a strategy to make specific themes an integral aspect of the design, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation of development policies and programs. So no longer do we design development programs piecemeal or without considering these issues. When we are designing, the considerations for gender, equality, and environmental preservation must be considered and infused right throughout the process. Now, in order to be successful, mainstreaming requires leadership. It needs somebody to champion the cause. It requires policy framework and dialogue. It requires implementation guidelines and tools. It requires accountability, resources, and application of lessons learned. To enhance our capacity and our overall impact in our development efforts, JSIF has sought to integrate gender and mainstreaming in our operations. And we have gotten certification in these two areas. We are currently certified by the International Organization for Standardization, ISO 14001, in environment, and we are also gender certified through the Bureau of Gender Affairs. These issues are integrated in our operations. Environment is integrated in the operations, processes, and projects and sub-projects, while gender is integrated at the sub-project and the project level. Now, of course, this is a continuous process where we will integrate over time. It's a process of transitioning and improving, and we will get to the place eventually where gender is right throughout, but for now it is in the work that we do underground with the beneficiaries. So gender mainstreaming. Gender mainstreaming is really an organizational strategy to bring gender perspectives to all aspects of an institution's policy and activities through building gender capacity and accountability. At JSIF, gender is integrated into all aspects of our project cycle. Now, at the portfolio or the project level, when we are designing a project for implementation, for example, the Basic Needs Trust Fund, gender is considered from we are writing the project appraisal document. So when we talk with our donors, gender, the indicators that we will use to measure the project at its completion are already built in from the design phase. So we will have indicators like the number of men versus the number of women that benefit from a particular infrastructure or training project. Now we know that gender does not speak just to men or women, but it also includes vulnerable groups, persons with disabilities, etc. So that is also integrated. Now, when we mainstream gender at this stage, it means we are designing a project that is comprehensive and is inclusive. It means no one is left out. A project may impact males differently from how it impacts females, and as a result, we consider this from the design phase to ensure that when we are evaluating, we have no unintended negative impact from the project on any one beneficiary group. At our sub-project level, this is at the community level, our appraisal process. And our appraisal process is where we go in and we find out from the beneficiary, what is the problem you want us to address? How does it affect you? What do you propose to be the solution? And at this level, we utilize our gender assessment tool, which tells us the poverty rate. Are males more affected than females? Are elderly persons more vulnerable? What about persons with disabilities? What is the division of labor? What's the difference in vulnerability between social groups and the differential needs of women versus men? And in collecting this data, it assists us to design a project that is more inclusive, a project that responds to the different needs of all the different groups. And so in our formulation design, we do a lot of infrastructure. JSIF is heavily social infrastructure, but even in that part, gender has to be infused. And so when our designers go into the community, all groups must be consulted. So if it's a road that is being constructed, no group is excluded from the discussion. Every group must have a voice, whether it be the young people, the elderly, women or men, all persons are included in the design of the project. Now, one thing that I want to point out is participation. in infusing gender, we must acknowledge and use the skills of women and men that exist in the community. JSIF has a concept of community contribution. As we have moved away from the concept of handouts, we are now inviting communities to play an active part in their development. So what we ask the community to do is to contribute a series of items. We call it sweat equity, and so whether it may be the bushing of the road before construction, or it may be the provision of refreshments for certain meetings, the provision of a site office, all of this is accumulated and it is priced, and we call it the community's contribution to the project. Now, in making a contribution to a project, for example, we have large infrastructure projects happening now, integrated infrastructures. For a project that's $100 million, community contribution could be $10 million. That's a significant investment by the community. The ability for us to infuse gender into this now means that women, men, persons with disabilities, everybody can play a part in the execution of this project to their own development. At our supervision phase, our supervision phase really means that the project is going to start, works are going to start on the ground. And at this stage, we usually have what we call a project information meeting, which ensures that the community and all stakeholders are aware of what the roles are, who's going to be responsible for what, how are we going to communicate. And at this stage, the issue of gender is raised and it is communicated to contractor, it is communicated to supervisor, to community persons, all parties involved. And what this means for us is that we do not tolerate any sexual discrimination on site. Women are to be allowed to work on the project, and if they work with on the same task as men, they should be paid the same amount of money. When our project officers go on site, they check the site diary to see who came and who has worked on the site, and all of those things are integrated at that aspect of the process. So our supervision phase now is where everything that we have planned concerning gender, we must see it happening on the ground. And of course, monitoring and evaluation is where we check to see if we have done what we said we were going to do. And so our M&E officers go out and they use same site diaries, they use our appraisal report, and we check to see these indicators that we highlighted initially. Have we met them? We targeted 10% women. Did we meet that quota? If not, what was the reason? And this information is used to help us to improve future projects going forward. At the organizational level, so what I mentioned was the interventions at community level. At the organizational level now, JSIF, through some of our projects, have done institutional strengthening. And what that does is we engage a consultant to help us to improve our capacity to include gender in our operations. And we've extended invitations to other ministries, other government agencies to improve their capacity. So that is gender. I'm going to invite my colleague, Mrs. Preston, to talk about environment.
Afternoon. Okay, so environmental mainstream, what does that mean? So it basically means that it's the active promotion of environmental sustainability in the identification, planning, negotiation, and implementation of policies and projects. So it therefore requires a focus on a proactive approach to include the integration of environmental sustainability rather than as an add-on to projects and policies. So, as Mrs. Barrett spoke, the Jamaica Social Investment Fund is an ISO certified organization. In January of 2009, we received our ISO certification 14001, 2004, and currently we are being upgraded to 2015. What this means is that JSIF recognizes environmental protection and sustainability as a guiding principle and one of our core business practices. This means that we have both in office and at the project site, we have integrated environmental sustainability. So, for example, our in-office initiatives include the development of a green procurement policy, recycling of paper and plastics, the use of energy-efficient appliances, equipment, and electronics, water-efficient plumbing fixtures like low-flush toilets, and we have mandatory EMS training for all staff, whether temporary or permanent. So this is basically our JSIF project cycle. As was mentioned before, JSIF is heavily civil works oriented, and so there's always the potential for some environmental impact. At every site, at every point in the project cycle, the environment is taken into consideration. At the very first stage, there is pre-screening. So any project that comes in and there is a potential for environmental impact, if we cannot mitigate those environmental impact, the project will go no further. Those that pass that test, they go for approval, and they get approval from the various committees and the board. Once that is given, it goes to design and technical review. This design is done by a qualified consultant who goes on the site and he does his design, and this design must incorporate any mitigations for the potential environmental impacts that have been identified in the pre-screening process. The contractor then gets an environmental management plan as part of his contract, and that guides him in the implementation of his works. Then, of course, monitoring and reporting. All projects, all civil work projects, they're monitored by the technical officer, the environmental officer, the internal and external EMS auditors, the consultant, as well as the external auditor. So we have 6 different levels of monitoring on our sites. And here they monitor for if there are any environmental impacts, were the mitigation measures being implemented. If they are being implemented, are they working? If not working, what can we do? What do we have to change? So, project design, as I said, the environment is included from the beginning. So project designs are typically standard features such as water-efficient plumbing, energy-efficient lighting, rainwater harvesting, and tertiary level sewage treatment facilities. So, as was mentioned, the environmental management plan is included in all contract documents. So this guides the contractor in how the work is to be executed. So it guides him as how to manage all aspects such as noise pollution, soil pollution, water pollution, energy conservation, waste management, and the protection of forestry and wildlife. And of course, education is key. We have several trainings and workshop sensitizations that we conduct not only with our staff internally, but with our contractors and consultants which are carrying out our projects, because we can't monitor you for something that we have not educated you on. So we have these meetings to let you know what our standards are, what are expected of you, and the rules that you must follow. We also have meetings with our stakeholders, with our community beneficiaries, to let them know what is it that we're looking for, because as a part of our community approach, we involve everyone, and so we must let them know what do we expect of you as a partner in our projects. And then, of course, as I said, we have mandatory EMS training for all staff. Thank you. Oh, I would like to introduce Nikoy. Nikoy is one of our Zika warriors, and he's a prime example of how we have our skills and livelihood training that integrate with community involvement as well as the environment.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. Lovely speech. I was actually shocked just now. I didn't hear my name, but she quickly fixed it. Firstly, I think I should pass remarks for the food. I think the fish was actually awesome, and I see some of my friends over there attesting to that. But the reason why I'm actually here today is because I'm by far one of the best things that JSIF has to offer. Now, just last year, I wasn't doing anything. I was at my home, you know. I tried my best to volunteer. I think volunteerism kind of gives me something constructive to do when I'm not doing nothing. So I volunteer for groups such as JSIF, my friends from CSJP, my CDC, SDC, and any form of organization that come in my community. Now, during that time, I got involved with the Zika training. Now, to me, it was kind of interesting. I really got to meet a lot of new people. I also got a better understanding of my career path. I now understand that it's not where you want to go, it's actually where you're needed. So that to me is really a plus for my life. And one of the things that the Zika training has really instilled in me is, firstly, I can now accurately explain to community members about mosquito breeding and the effects of mosquito breeding. you know, that persons was not aware before. Firstly, I find persons in my community saying that the Zika is actually transmitted by air. Some persons actually believe it's transmitted sexually. So you know, it kind of gives you a better understanding when the training and all. And the main thing I really want to share with you, before my involvement with the Zika program, as I said, just the basic, nothing here to there, volunteerism. But now, where I am currently, from last year to now, I'm working with the Clarendon Municipal Corporation. I'm actually a supervisor. Yes, I'm actually a supervisor, and I'm in charge of a 10-man team. Yes. You can see Omar Sweeney laughing. He's really nice. Yeah, so even when I was at the back, my phone was ringing off, you know, so you can see the importance of me being a part. And again, this is really thanks to JSIF. I really didn't get the opportunity to tell JSIF thanks for this opportunity that they have instilled in me. I consider myself a powerhouse, and saying powerhouse, I can see some of my friends from JSIF actually smiling. Well, the reason I call myself a powerhouse is because the program that got me the supervisor job was actually sponsored by JPS. So I went to the JPS headquarters, and during the training time, I saw a power pole, and I noticed that it runs to the schools, to the shops, and to the other organizations. I said, you know what? I believe I have something to offer to my friends, my family, the persons I work with. That's where the powerhouse concept is really from. And I mean, I'm living by that powerhouse concept. I'm going with it full forward, and as you can see, JSIF has truly changed my life. Just yesterday, I had a speech in my community, and now I'm at the Pegasus Hotel. And about 5 o'clock from now, 5 o'clock, couple hours from now, I actually have a meeting by the municipal corporation with the mayor, the deputy, and others. So again, I just want to say thanks to JSIF, thanks to CSJP, I never forget you guys. I want to big up my community facilitator also, Natoya Coley. She has done very, very well. She has been there for me, for other community members. She had stood by Canaanites, she has walked with it, and now we are at the Pegasus Hotel, so thanks so much.
I just want to tell Mr. Davis, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. We appreciate it, and please go back to the community and do the things you're doing.
Nikoy has left us all with the largest smiles I've seen probably since lunch, right? Now, you heard words earlier in our presentations like inclusive, integrated, and that's the approach that JSIF has taken for all these years. I have been fortunate enough to be with JSIF for the last 16 and a half years, so I have actually watched the roles change in JSIF to see how we have learned from good things, from bad things. The Crystal City was a perfect case study. Mrs. Barrett and Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Preston's presentation about, again, how do we include things from the beginning of the project appraisal to ensure that we get it as right as possible. And one of the ways that JSIF ensures that we make sure that we do that is, again, the involvement in the community. Again, community development, that is our mandate, that's our That's what we're here for. We often at JSIF say that we're trying to work ourselves out of a job because we want to be the key that helps to poverty. You know, we used to use the word eradication, but we have to come back to reduction now because the eradication is a far-reaching goal, but I know that people in this room know what it will take to get there. And Nikoy is a prime example of projects and programs working to help us get to that goal. We're also going to have a presentation now by Gresford Bennett, who will talk to us about beyond the skill. We saw what giving the skill can do. You know, they said teach a man to fish. However, he's going to talk to us now about beyond the skill, the JSIF approach to livelihoods. Mr. Bennett is a development practitioner with over 18 years in development studies. However, more significantly, in the area of development finance, working with the British, Japanese, and Canadian governments. His main area of focus is private sector development and training. A teacher and chemist in another life, is that so, Gresford? Mr. Bennett now provides support to the Jamaica Social Investment Fund's Integrated Community Development Project. You hear that again? Integrated. I mean, we learned so much that we had to name an entire project with the word integrated. With a focus on alternative livelihood skill development, we're going to ask Mr. Gresford to come to the podium.
I'm waiting on the presentation. Good afternoon. Okay. Thank you, Celia, for that introduction. Fellow colleagues, very important people, good afternoon again. You know, we'd like to share with you, just listen to the young man that I do not want to speak after, ever again. You know, I would like to share with you that for us, the skill is not the result that we seek. The skill is not the result. For us, it's just a way to provide the capacity, provide the support to the people that we work with, the young people, you know, in our communities, in terms of how to achieve their goals. We, through the quality delivery of this skill, we are really just pointed in the right direction. Again, welcome to the Jamaica Social Investment Fund Alternative Livelihood Skill Development presentation, Beyond the Skill, the JSIF approach. My task here today is really a very simple one. I'm here today to provide just a look at how the JSIF view livelihood skill development. It's not expected, it's not supposed to be exhaustive really, it's more demonstrative. We would like to share with you our view, some of our assumptions that drive that view, the underlying in principles, some of our outputs. I think you have just seen, you know, the young man speak to what he received and how he has used that, and some of the results that we have achieved. I would like to share with you as well, most importantly, you know, some of the feedback from our clientele. I think you just got a sample of that in terms of this young man that moved from a place of not being sure, you know, where he's headed, to now being one of the most important persons in this room. The result that we seek with the ALSD program is really the continuous improvement of the livelihood of our clientele, our stakeholders, our residents, the people that we work with. How do we achieve this result? We look at the development of not just the human capital within the community, which, you know, in this case, we provide the skill training, you have the Zika warriors, you have the various programs, but we also look at how we develop the social capital of that community. And when you hear that young man spoke just now, you know, he talked about all the connections he have made. You know, he could big up CSJP, big up JSIF, spoke about going to JPS. So we look at that level of network that we need to provide to them so that we can then help them to actually those same capital towards achieving legitimate and reasonable work. The Jamaica Social Investment Fund, has always been involved in training at some level. I think just listening to Stephan, he spoke to you about that project they did. Which community that was again, Stephan? Crystal City. And that training was a part of that particular project. But traditionally, the training was more around construction, tourism, relatively traditional training. The learning from that is that we continue to move towards an approach that, go beyond the traditional, looking at the people. It's more a whole space in development. And I'll just like to just take you through it's supposed to be in some kind of order, but don't kill me if you think that one bullet should be